April 1841. A lettered gentleman in Colleton County did something so indecent, it startled even the men who measured their power in lashes. Silas Rutled, hungry for status, lean as a hooked nail, declared his 28-year-old daughter, Catherine, to be placed under the absolute authority of an enslaved man named Ezekiel Cross, not as nurse, not as companion, as master in all but law. The county's white society reeled, clutching at propriety like pearls. They did not yet know what it meant, or what would be made of Catherine in the months that followed. By November, her body would be altered beyond easy explanation. 13 men would lie dead. Cypress Grove would be a pyre. Before the fire, the Low Country's spring arrived with a weight that made breath labor. The Combe River dragged itself along, black as a scrying glass, while Spanish moss hung in funeral pennants from live oaks. Rice fields lay drowned and glittering, worked by scores of bodies wading shoulder to shoulder from dawn to the smothering dusk. Wealth was stacked there the way bones are stacked in catacombs, out of sight, called necessary. Cypress Grove spread over 800 middling acres. Rutled owned 58 souls, which made him comfortable by the arithmetic of the day, though lesser among the county's crowned families. The mighty wintered in Charleston, sent sons north in polished boots, and wore surnames that worked like keys. Silas wanted a key like that. He had married Elizabeth Yancey in 1812, a practical woman, ledger-sure, unimpressed by pageantry, and lost her the next year to childbirth, leaving him with an infant daughter and an emptiness he tried to fill with influence. He raised Catherine behind curtains, tutors, polite silences. Rumor did the rest. By 28, she weighed near 260 pounds, her body bloated by the fashionable poisons men called medicine. Laudanum blurred her edges. Calomel gnawed her. She had fits. Once she slashed her father's hand with a letter opener. He wore the scar the way others wore rings. Colleton whisperers said, "Poor Silas," and "Mad girl," and "Such a pity." They did not know what she had seen at 12. They did not know her mind was not broken but harrowed by truth. On April 7th, a courier arrived, quiet as bad news. Silas broke a seal of red wax, impressed with a sickle crossed by wheat. He knew that mark. The brethren of the harvest. 13 men who met in the dark to water the land with blood. Part old Europe, part stolen African rights, all appetite. He'd been initiated in 1822 and stood through near 40 gatherings since, witness and participant to acts that wore the mask of tradition over a face of hunger. The letter tallied his sins in numbers. $12,000 owed, gambling, gambits, losses, a sum that would strip him of acreage and people alike if collected. But there was an alternative, the letter promised, for members in difficulty. Place the daughter under the authority of a chosen enslaved man for 1 full year, publicly, irrevocably, as if transferring a deed. Make a spectacle of it at a dinner of the county's best. Call it medicine. Swallow the humiliation, keep the power. The brethren would erase the debt, repair his fortunes. All it required was the sacrifice of a woman's dignity, which, by the county's lights, was a small price when weighed against a man's ambition. He sat up with the candle and the arithmetic of his soul. By dawn, he had written acceptance, his signature neat as a cut. 3 days later, another letter, another name. Ezekiel Cross, 33, bought by way of Virginia, skilled in carpentry and herbs. Quiet, obedient, On April 13th, the trader Henderson rattled into the yard with a wagon and a man who sat unbowed. Ezekiel's gaze did not fall. It measured. Tall, broad, the kind of strength that looks like a decision rather than a flaunt. His hands were calloused in precise places. His back bore no fresh scars. "You understand why you are here?" Silas asked. "Yes, sir," in a low Virginia drawl. "My daughter is unwell." "You will be responsible for her treatment. My grandmother was a healer," Ezekiel said. "She taught me before I was sold." Papers changed hands. A cabin near the big house was assigned, apart from the quarters. Supplies were listed. Duties would begin at first light. Ezekiel answered as ritual required. "Yes, sir, yes," until the door closed and he was allowed his own face. From inside his shirt, he drew a small wrapped square and unfolded names scrawled in a child's hand. Sarah, Benjamin, Ruth, wife, son, daughter. Sold south 3 years before to an Alabama furnace that called itself a plantation. Fever took Sarah, infection took Benjamin, absence took Ruth, who at 6 starved herself into silence. Silas had sold them, not for need, not for cause, for demonstration, to prove to the brethren he could be hard where others flinched. A family thrown on the fire to keep other men warm. Ezekiel had spent 2 years traveling by purchase, arranging sale after sale like steps on a stair, learning the brethren's rumors, their hiding places, their habits, their certainty that consequence was a story told to children. When the chance came to be bought into Cypress Grove, he took it like a blade. In his cabin, he folded the paper of names and placed it back over his heart. Then he lay and began to plan the ruin of Silas Rutled. April 14th. Judith, a housewoman with iron in her hair, led him to Catherine's door. "Miss Catherine," she called, soft, "your father's brought someone to help." Something heavy struck a wall. "No more treatments," Catherine slurred, venom behind the wobble. "Send him away." Judith's look said what words could not. "It is a bad day." Ezekiel entered alone. Curtains jaundiced the room. The air tasted of stale linen and Mercury's sweet rot. Books were broken spines on the floor. A portrait lay spidered with cracks. Catherine hunched in a stained dressing gown, hair unbound, hands shaking so constantly they hummed. "Who are you?" she demanded. "I said no doctors." "I am not a doctor, miss." "Ezekiel." "Your father asked me to help." Her laugh was a saw. "They mean chains when they say it. They mean silence." "What are you supposed to forget?" he asked. That pierced. Her anger faltered. "You don't know." "I know only what is said of your illness." She watched him as if he were a cipher. "You're not from here." "Virginia, miss." "Do you know what happens in this house? In the cellar?" His pulse laddered. "I do not." "Liar," she said, but without heat, as if tired of the shape of the word. "Everyone lies." Ezekiel went to the window and opened the curtains. Light detonated. Catherine cried out, shielding her eyes. "When did you last walk outside?" he asked. "I can't. I'm too weak." "When did you last eat without laudanum dulling the hunger?" "The medicine is necessary," she recited. "Doctors say." "What if the doctors are wrong?" Silence tightened, her tremor stilled by degrees. "What did you say?" she whispered. "What if the medicines keep you tame? What if someone is making sure you never grow well enough to speak of what you saw?" Her head lifted, and the room seemed to find a second axis. "He told you." "He told me nothing." But mercury marks its victims, and laudanum teaches the tongue to stumble. Healthy women are not made like this by chance. "Why would you say it?" Suspicion returned, brittle. Another test? I can make you well enough to walk the yard and name the men you remember. It will not be gentle. You will shake and hate me and hurt, and your father will forbid it. But I will do it if you wish. Why? Because Silas Rutled sold my family to prove himself to monsters. The sharpest wound I can give him is a daughter who remembers. Truth sits differently than flattery. She weighed it, then nodded once, a condemned woman blessing her own gallows. You want revenge? Yes. What did he take? My wife and children. He split us like kindling because it pleased him. The brethren, she said, and it was not a question. He sold them for the brethren. You know them. I know their seller. Her laugh cracked into something close to a sob, and then steeled. If I agree, if I let you fix me, what then? You become clear. Then we decide we. She tasted the word. Listen, Ezekiel. Her eyes shone with a dangerous light. I have killed before. 3 house people who would have carried my lucid words down to him. I don't remember the how. Laudanum is a thief, but I know they disappeared after I warned them. If you mean to use me and discard me, don't mistake me for a victim. I believe you, he said, and I won't betray you. Good. She stood, testing her legs the way one tests a bridge. Then one condition. When the reckoning's done, I want to die. I won't keep this inside me and pretend at a gentle life. He hesitated only long enough to acknowledge the cost. Agreed. The first week was a storm. Ezekiel bled the laudanum down by inches. He traded opium's velvet for bitter herbs, valerian to coax sleep without erasing the mind, chamomile to calm the gut, milk thistle to beg mercy of the liver. Catherine sweated through fevers, retched into a basin he held, cursed him, clutched him, slept in bursts, woke shaking. He kept vigil, a tide that did not go out. The tremor quieted, her speech unblurred. He marched her down the hall, 2 doors, 5, 10, lean meats, boiled greens, small portions measured with a carpenter's mind. She fought the scale like a rival, but he was relentless, and the body began to remember itself. They talked in the interstices. Catherine unspooled the cellar's memory. Candles, robed men, a woman on the table, grooves carved to fairy blood. She told him of years of being told she had imagined it all, that hysteria was a storm in her own skull. She spoke of a hidden journal, dates and names and coded notes on footsteps at odd hours. Ezekiel told her of Sarah, who sang as she worked and taught letters to small mouths forbidden them. Of Benjamin, quick as a struck match at numbers. Of Ruth, who turned flowers into altars. He told her how Silas smiled when he split them. That smile seemed to hurt Catherine more than any detail. I'm sorry, she said, knowing the poverty of the word, and promised a debt to be paid. April 29th, the announced humiliation. 41 guests sat to oysters and duck and rice done 3 ways. Judge Palem, Reverend Crenshaw, Banker Lyle, Marcus Fanning, names that fit too easily in mouths used to verdicts. Catherine took her father's right hand, face composed, appetite paired to manners. Ezekiel poured wine, lifted plates, listened from the edges where servants go invisible. Information is an instrument. He tuned it as he moved. After cake, glass tapped glass. Silas rose. As you know, he said, my daughter has suffered. Physicians from Charleston, a gentleman from Philadelphia, no relief. 2 weeks past, I engaged Ezekiel here, who knows the old herbals, and you may see her improvement. Polite murmur, a few glances like knives. This improvement requires reordering, Silas continued. From this night, Ezekiel assumes complete authority over Catherine's person, treatments, and daily life. The room shifted, a school of fish turning. "Surely," Reverend Crenshaw ventured. "A nurse." "My decision is made," Silas said. "Catherine?" She smiled as if carved from calm. "I trust my father's judgment. Ezekiel's kindness helps me." But beneath the table, her knuckles bit her napkin. Ezekiel saw the flash in her eye. A promise. Guests drifted away in stratified outrage. Questions were whispered in doorways. What will people say? And the brethren will not approve of public spectacle. By midnight, the house was quiet. Catherine faced the window's dark pane. "It is done," she said when Ezekiel knocked. "I belong to a man who belongs to a man." Absurdity has never been so precise. Her voice softened. "Now they will stop looking. We will work." She opened a wooden box and drew papers coded into nonsense for any casual eye. "Their ledger exists," she said. "A book of years. Names, dates, what they did, who ate. There's a hidden room off the main cellar. They think I'm a ghost who loses her own steps. They were careless." "When can we go?" Ezekiel asked. "Father leaves for Charleston May 14th. 3 days away. 2 weeks to prepare. We map the cellar. We make the keys we need. We decide how to walk into the dark and carry something out of it." They spoke in whispers until near 2. When he returned to his cabin, Ezekiel held the paper of his names by candlelight and spoke to the dead as if they were listening through the wick. The house settled, old wood sighing. Beneath it somewhere, a door waited behind a wall that looked like stone. 2 weeks ticked like teeth. 2 weeks drifted past under the disguise of peace. Catherine grew sharper, leaner, her eyes bright with a light that unnerved the servants and silenced gossip. Ezekiel watched from behind obedience, building patience like a scaffold. Every night, in the small hours, he studied the house, its creaks, its locks, its hidden rhythms. Catherine decoded fragments of her journals for him, whispering the history of the brethren. They exist in Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans, Richmond. Different names, same faith, she murmured. They believe blood feeds the soil. That power must consume weakness, or it rots. Her tone was not fear, but weariness, the kind that comes from knowing evil intimately. She told him of sacrifices, slaves, wanderers, the poor, all swallowed by swamps. They keep records of it all, she said. They believe guilt shared equally is protection. If one falls, all fall. When May 14th came, Silas left for Charleston at dawn. The carriage rattled away beneath the canopy of moss, and silence sank over Cypress Grove. Catherine and Ezekiel waited until dark. At 10, they met in her room. Catherine wore black, hair tied tight, her face pale but steady. "Are you certain?" Ezekiel asked. "I have been waiting 16 years, she said. "Certainty is all that's left." They moved through corridors thick with moonlight, down to the kitchen, past the pantry. Catherine pressed a narrow panel. A hidden latch clicked. Stale, damp air breathed from below. The descent was steep, narrow, and close. The air smelled of old smoke, blood, and the sweet rot of something long buried. Catherine's voice was a thread. "You'll get used to it," she said softly. I never did. At the bottom, the cellar opened like a wound. A wide chamber of earth and sweating stone, its center dominated by a massive wooden table carved with channels for blood. Candle holders lined the walls, their wax melted into thick stalactites. A rack of black robes stood like headless men waiting for command. Catherine moved with precision, pressing a particular stone in the far wall. It shifted, grinding inward. Beyond lay a smaller room, 10 feet square, the heart of the brethren's secret. A single object waited at the center, a ledger bound in dark, cracked leather, its clasps tarnished but strong. Around it, jars sealed with wax, smaller books, things that moved faintly in the shadows of glass. "That's it," Catherine whispered. Ezekiel approached the stand. The ledger's weight resisted his hands as though reluctant to be opened. When it finally yielded, the stench of age and ink rose up. Pages thick as skin, each line written in a precise, practiced hand. Dates, names, rituals, a catalog of horror spanning 40 years. He read, and the pages became a mirror of madness. Rituals every 6 weeks, aligned with harvest moons. Bodies used as offerings, their blood mixed with soil, their flesh consumed in ceremony. He turned another page, and another, until words lost meaning and became a rhythm of cruelty. And then, 3 short lines that stopped him cold. Purchased family unit from Virginia. Woman, Sarah. Children, Benjamin, Ruth. Male retained for demonstration of resolve. Sent to Alabama contact. That was all. His family reduced to a ledger entry, a transaction, a proof of strength. Catherine touched his arm. "Now you see what they are." "I saw that long ago," Ezekiel said. His voice trembled, but his eyes were calm. "Now I see what must be done." They copied what they could. Names, dates, rituals implicating the most powerful men in the county. Catherine's hand was quick, mechanical, her face drained of expression. 3 hours passed before the faintest noise reached them. The creak of a floorboard above, the sigh of a door. Then came light, harsh, yellow, moving. Ezekiel froze. Catherine turned, eyes wide. Silas stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 men. Behind them, more shadows gathered in the main chamber. "I must say," Silas began, voice smooth as oil, "I'm impressed." "You found the inner room," Catherine straightened, her fear burned away by fury. "You were supposed to be in Charleston." "I was," Silas said, "but I returned this afternoon. I wanted to see what miracles my daughter might perform when left alone." He stepped inside. His eyes lingered on the open ledger. "Did you really think I would not prepare for this? That I would not anticipate treachery?" "You poisoned me," Catherine said, her voice low, almost calm. "You called it medicine. You fed me lies until I forgot my own name. You saw what a child cannot comprehend," he said softly. "You would have destroyed everything. I only meant to protect you from yourself. I was 12, she whispered. "I watched you butcher a woman and drink her blood." Silas sighed, as if disappointed by her choice of words. Evil is a word for those who fear power. He turned his gaze on Ezekiel. "And you, using my daughter to avenge your own misfortunes. I suppose I should admire your courage." Ezekiel said nothing. He was counting men, distances, exits, and finding no mercy in the numbers. "Bring them upstairs," Silas ordered. "We'll discuss this properly." They were locked in Silas's study. The walls were thick, the air close. Catherine pulled a sheaf of papers from her dress, their copied evidence. "I hid these," she said. "He didn't search me." "It won't matter if we're dead," Ezekiel replied. "Then we won't die tonight." Her voice was fierce. "He still thinks he can control me." That's his weakness outside. Voices gathered, heavy steps, low arguments. When the door finally opened, Marcus Fanning appeared, face pale. "They're ready," he said. "Come peacefully." They were led once more into the cellar, now transformed. Candles flamed in every holder, their smoke curling like serpents. The 13 men of the brethren waited, draped in robes of black and crimson. Silas took his seat at the head of the circle. "Brothers," he began, "my daughter and her accomplice have violated the sanctity of our order. They have seen what was not meant to be seen. Then they die," Judge Pelham said simply. "Perhaps," Silas replied. "But death is simple. I prefer usefulness." He turned to Ezekiel. "You want revenge for your family? I can give it. Join us. Not as an equal, you never could be that, but as an associate. You'll have power, wealth, protection. And the man in Alabama who worked your family to death, Edward Gaines, I will give you everything you need to destroy him." Ezekiel's jaw tightened. "And if I refuse?" "Then you both die tonight," Silas said softly. "Bodies to the swamp, names forgotten." He smiled faintly. "Or you can live. Trade your soul for survival. It's what most men do eventually." Ezekiel looked at Catherine. Her lips barely moved, but he read the words, "Don't." He hesitated, then said, "If I accept, she goes free. Not back to her room, free, north." With money enough to vanish, the circle stirred. Some objected, but Judge Pelham murmured, "Let her go." "No one will believe her," Silas considered. "Very well. She will leave tomorrow at dawn. You remain for initiation. 3 weeks from tonight, you join us." Catherine's face blanched. "No," Ezekiel cut her off. "Agreed." And so it was sealed. At sunrise, a carriage carried Catherine away from Cypress Grove. She was not allowed to speak, not allowed to look back. But when their eyes met for the last time, Ezekiel saw understanding there. He was not surrendering. He was buying time. For 3 weeks he worked under watch, silent and compliant. He was allowed near the study, the cellar, the barns, always with eyes on him. He learned the routines, the weaknesses, the arrogance of men who believed themselves untouchable. And he waited. On the night of June 2nd, Silas came to his cabin, alone. "Tomorrow is your initiation," he said. "You'll be tested." "You must not hesitate." Ezekiel said nothing. "I know she's not in Philadelphia," Silas continued. "She's hiding, planning something foolish. If you fail the test, my men will find her. She dies. Do you understand?" Ezekiel nodded. "I understand." Silas smiled, almost kindly. "Good. Then perhaps you'll see that power is not cruelty. It's simply truth." When he left, the night felt thinner. Ezekiel sat in the dark with the paper of names. "Forgive me," he whispered to it, "for what I'll have to do. I promise it won't be in vain." Midnight, June 3rd. The cellar burned with candlelight. The brethren stood waiting, 13 shadows. Ezekiel was stripped to the waist, hands bound, brought before the altar. Silas's voice echoed low. "Brothers of the harvest, tonight we prove that even hatred can be harnessed, that any man can serve power if the price is right." 2 men dragged forward a bound figure, a young enslaved woman, trembling, gagged, her eyes wide with terror. "This is your test," Silas said. "Take the knife. Make the first cut. Show us that vengeance outweighs conscience. Refuse, and you die." The chanting began. Deep, rhythmic, ancient nonsense made holy by repetition. Ezekiel stared at the girl. Her eyes pleaded through the gag. In them he saw Sarah, Benjamin, Ruth. He reached for the knife. Its blade caught the candlelight. He stepped toward the altar. The chanting swelled. Silas smiled. Ezekiel moved, but not toward the girl. The knife flashed upward, clean and swift, and found the throat of the nearest robed man. Blood burst hot across the stone. Before the others could react, Ezekiel seized the dying man's robe and hurled it over the candles, plunging the chamber into fractured shadow. Panic followed, shouts, movement, confusion. Ezekiel was no longer a man, but momentum. He struck, turned, seized another's arm, drove the blade into soft flesh, broke bone, used bodies as shields. The brethren stumbled, unarmed and unprepared, their authority useless against fury that had waited years to speak. He reached the altar, cut the woman free. "Run!" he hissed. "Run and don't stop!" She fled, screaming up the stairs. 7 men remained. Silas stood unmoved, blood speckling his face. "You've killed yourself," he said. "And her. Do you understand that?" "Maybe," Ezekiel replied. "But not before I take you with me." He raised the knife again, and above them, the door burst open. Catherine had returned. Catherine had never gone north. For 3 weeks, she'd hidden in the slave quarters beneath the noses of men who never thought to look down. She had whispered through the dark, speaking to those whose lives had been taken inch by Cypress Grove, by Silas Rutled, by every man who met in that cellar and called it faith. When she heard the screams from below and saw the girl burst from the kitchen covered in blood and candle soot, she knew the time had come. She gathered them, the field hands, the maids, the men who had seen their children vanish, the women who had carried bruises for years without names. They came with tools turned to weapons, scythes, axes, shovels, hammers. They came barefoot, silent, burning. They came for judgment. The door to the cellar splintered inward under their weight. The brethren turned in confusion, half blinded by smoke. Ezekiel stood at the altar, knife in hand, breathing like a man reborn from fire. Then the tide hit. There was no order to it, no mercy. The overseers fell first, men who had built their pride from cruelty. Then the robed ones. Marcus Fanning reached for his pistol and died before he could cock it. Reverend Crenshaw cried prayers to a God he had desecrated, and the blows that found him came from hands he'd once owned. The air filled with screams, smoke, the iron smell of blood on stone. Candles toppled, robes burned, and years of horror ended in the single righteous violence of the oppressed. Silas Rutled tried to flee, dragging Catherine with him, a knife pressed to her throat. "Stop!" he shouted. "Stop, or I kill her!" Everything froze. The room flickered with firelight and breathing. Catherine did not flinch. Her voice was steady, almost tender. "Do it," she said. "Kill me." "You've done worse." Silas's hand trembled. "I can still escape," he muttered, as if reciting a prayer. "No," she said. "You can still nothing." She drove her elbow backward into his ribs. He gasped, loosened his grip, and Ezekiel was on him in an instant. They faced each other amid the wreckage, the enslaved man and the master who had believed himself untouchable. Smoke coiled between them like a living thing. "You took everything from me," Ezekiel said. "My wife, my son, my little girl. You did it to prove something to men who don't even deserve their own names." Silas's arrogance collapsed into a whisper. "Please." Ezekiel's voice was quiet as the grave. "Did they say please?" The knife came down once, then again, and the world grew quieter. When it was finished, the cellar was a tomb. 13 men who had called themselves the Brethren lay broken on their own altar. The flickering candles made halos of smoke over their bodies. Catherine stood at the center, trembling, not in fear but release. 16 years of madness, of mercury and laudanum, of forced silence, ended here, in the blood of those who caused it. Ezekiel approached her carefully. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No. Are you?" "Nothing that matters." They looked around them, the wreckage of evil laid bare. The air was thick with heat and grief. "What do we do now?" Ezekiel asked. Catherine's smile was faint, grim. "Now we burn it. All of it. Every stone, every word, but the ledger. Would damn us both," she said. "Justice won't live in a courthouse. It lives here." She gestured to the bloodied floor. "If we leave evidence, they'll come for us. They'll come for everyone who helped. The only way this ends is in ash." Ezekiel nodded slowly. "Then we burn it." They worked through the remainder of the night. The surviving enslaved men and women, 23 in all, helped carry wood, oil, and fabric. They said little. Each of them understood that silence was safety. When dawn's gray light began to filter through the trees, they left Cypress Grove one by one, vanishing into the swamps, into the roads, into legend. Only Catherine and Ezekiel remained. They piled the bodies, tore down the robes, smashed the jars that held unspeakable things. They placed the ledger atop the altar, its metal clasps catching the weak morning light. Ezekiel paused. "Wait." He opened the book one final time and tore out the 3 lines that named his family. "For them," he said softly. "So they're not forgotten." Catherine nodded. "Then light it." She touched a candle to the oil-soaked wood. Fire took instantly, roaring up the walls, devouring the ledger, the altar, the very air that had carried the brethren's chants. They ran up the stairs as the cellar began to collapse beneath the heat. Outside, the dawn was red with smoke. Cypress Grove burned like an offering, one that finally meant something. They stood in the yard until the house fell in on itself. The flames reached the sky. The screams were gone. Only the crackling remained, steady and cleansing. Catherine turned to Ezekiel. "What will you do now?" He looked toward the horizon. "Go north. Find others who want to fight. There are people running already, trying to make it to freedom. Maybe I can help them. Maybe I can make something that lasts. And you?" he asked. "I'll go north too. I've stolen enough from my father's accounts to start again. But I won't forget. I'll write it all down. Every word, they'll destroy it if they find it," Ezekiel warned. "Then I'll hide it," she said. "Code it, bury it, seal it where no one can touch it until the world is ready to see." She looked back at the ruins. The truth has a way of surfacing, even when the world tries to drown it. They stayed until the last beam fell, until the plantation was nothing but glowing bones. Then they turned and walked in opposite directions. Catherine toward Charleston, Ezekiel toward the frontier. 2 survivors carrying the same ghost. The official story was simple. A terrible fire at Cypress Grove. 13 respected men lost in a tragic accident. The master's poor, deranged daughter perished too, trapped in her room. The county wept. The newspapers praised. Funerals were held under oak canopies draped in black. Sermons spoke of divine mysteries, of good men taken too soon. No one asked what they had been doing in the cellar. No one wanted to. Within months, the enslaved people were sold off to other plantations. They kept their silence. It was safer that way. But in the quarters and the cabins, the story began to change form. It became whisper, then legend. The night the masters burned, the woman who remembered, the man who made the reckoning. Years passed. The swamp reclaimed the land. The ruins sank beneath vines and time. In 1863, Union troops camped nearby during the war. They found bones, tunnels, strange carvings. But the war had too much death already to care about old ghosts. In 1971, workers demolishing the remains of an old outbuilding found a journal sealed inside a wall. It was written in cipher, a labyrinth of symbols and codes. It told of blood and ash, of names long buried. Before historians could decipher it, the journal vanished from county archives. Some said it was stolen. Others whispered it was destroyed by the descendants of those 13 men, protecting their ancestors' memory. And yet some believe it still exists, waiting. What is known is this. In April of 1841, a plantation burned to ash. 13 powerful men died that night. Catherine Rutled disappeared. And somewhere in the chaos, an enslaved man named Ezekiel slipped out of history, only to reappear, perhaps, as rumor. In the years that followed, whispers spread across the South about a man called the Witness, a figure who moved in the shadows, helping people escape, burning records, freeing the forgotten. Some said he bore scars shaped like letters, that he carried 3 folded pages close to his heart. Whether he was real or not doesn't matter. The story was real enough to terrify those who still profited from chains. Because in the end, truth doesn't die with its keepers. It waits. It remembers. It burns. And long after the masters turned to dust, people still told the story of Cypress Grove, the plantation that fed on blood and paid for it in fire, the tale of a woman who refused to forget, and a man who turned vengeance into justice. Because cruelty, no matter how well hidden, always leaves a sound behind. A whisper in the dark, a memory that won't go quiet. And somewhere, in an attic or beneath a floorboard, a journal still sleeps, its pages stained with smoke, waiting for hands brave enough to open it again. Do you believe everything was truly destroyed? Or that somewhere, the truth still breathes? If you do, stay a while. There are other stories like this, other secrets that never learned to die.